Hey, Freight Pod listeners. Before we get started today, let's do a quick shout out to our sponsor, Rapido Solutions Group. Rapido connects logistics and supply chain organizations in North America with the best nearshore talent to scale efficiently and deliver superior customer service. Rapido works with businesses from all sides of the logistics industry. This includes brokers, carriers, and logistics software companies. Rapido builds out teams with roles across customer and carrier sales and support, back office administration, and technology services. The team at Rapido knows logistics and people. It's what sets them apart. Rapido is driven by an inside knowledge of how to recruit, hire, and train within the industry, and a passion to build better solutions for success. The team is led by CEO Danny Frisco and COO Roberto Acaza, two guys I've worked with from my earliest days in the industry at Coyote. I have a long history with them and I trust them. I've even been a customer of theirs at Molo, and let me tell you, they made our business better. In the current market where everyone's trying to do more with less and save money, solutions like Rapido are a great place to start. To learn more, check them out at gorapido.com. That's gorapido.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Freight Pod. I'm your host, Andrew Silver, joined today by, per usual, another special guest. They're all special. This one's maybe especially special. I don't know. These guys are coming off a couple big announcements between a large fundraise and an acquisition. Call him a prodigy. This kid was building businesses when he was like 7, or at least trying to. And this is Sean Henry. I'm joined by today, the CEO and founder of Stored. Welcome to the show, Sean. How you doing?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
So, your name first came across my purview, I guess, through Ted Alling. And Ted was one of my first guests, and he's he's a mentor and an inspiration. He's just one of those guys that you look at and you're like, man, I want to live my life like him. So I want to start there. He's so high on you and has said such great things about you. Said I should get you on the show. And so I'm just curious, talk to me a little bit about your relationship to Ted and how you met him.
Yeah, absolutely. He is such an important part of our story, and as a mentor to me and an early believer in Stored. And met us at the time more when you nailed it at the beginning of I was more trying to start businesses, not necessarily having major successes. I think it's easy to look at Stored, look at my age, and assume a one-hit wonder. You try something and you make it kind of thing, but you're spot on. I mean, I sold my first product on eBay in 2003, and then I had dozens of failed attempts at things, or not necessarily failed, just never made it far, and kept pivoting to the next thing until finally landing on Stored. And so I met Ted very happenstance in the earliest days of the company while I was a student at Georgia Tech. My freshman year, spring break, I was trying to use that week to go extra hard in the business. And one of the things I was doing at the time was trying to reach out to founders maybe like one stage ahead of me in a similar industry to learn from, and just saying, hey, I'm a young founder, I'm a student at Georgia Tech, I'm trying to build this business, I'd love to learn from you specifically for X reason. And through that, I met Stephen Vlahos, one of the co-founders of Bellhops in Chattanooga. And he was basically like, hey, you should come up to Chattanooga one day this week if you have time. I want to introduce you to a few folks and just kind of show you the lay of the land. Ended up going to their office, walking down to what at the time was the Lamppost Group office, now Dynamo, which was kind of like Ted, Barry, and Allen's kind of family office area. They were incubating businesses, trying new things. And Ted, through Stephen, took the meeting, and very fortunate that he believed in me and loved not necessarily the vision, because we were still very early stage, pivoting around, thinking through some ideas, but maybe the experience and kind of upbringing and some of the kind of early education I had. I did homeschool for 2 years. It's an area I was able to spend more time on the computer and building some early businesses, and that's something he was doing with his kids. And so we really just hit it off and bonded. And he was like, you should stay an extra day. I want to show you XYZ, introduce you to these people. And at the end, he said, by the way, I'm about to launch this program called Dynamo, where we're going to start as an accelerator program, incubate businesses, invest a small amount of capital to help businesses get off the ground, move to Chattanooga for a little bit. I'd love for you to move to Chattanooga. And I was like, man, this guy's just trying to sell me to move to Chattanooga because he's obsessed with this city. And it
He's like the
started
unofficial. He's like the unofficial mayor of Chattanooga. I've never seen someone higher on their own city than Ted.
exactly. We used to walk around and joke like, if only I had a shirt that says "I know Ted Alling," you could get it anywhere in Chattanooga. You could do anything you want.
100%.
And it came just out over the next few months. Like, no, this guy's not just obsessed with Chattanooga. Like, they are building something special. He cares deeply about us. There are real reasons to go there, and we ended up in the program. And I'll just kind of put a pin in it with, while obviously since then we've raised a lot of money, have a lot of investors, board members, advisors, et cetera. Ted has always been one of those kind of personal, deep friends as much as business friends. The person that checks in on you at family events, holidays, reaches out when he knows something's wrong. And I was telling a story. I think it was a different, uh, maybe it was a podcast. I was talking about this recently, but I hadn't thought about it in a while. Which is, he really leads from the front lines, and I think that's what's so special about him. And someone was asking me, "How did you get early sales success at Stored?" And I said, we actually did a lot of cold calling and cold emailing early on. And part of it was because of the Dynamo connection, where they had started a freight brokerage prior. And it was very much a smile and dial, cold calling oriented culture. And I remembered, I hadn't thought about it in a while. There was a day in the Dynamo Accelerator program where Ted just paired himself off hour by hour with each business and said, I'm just going to sit down with you and make cold calls. He doesn't even know these companies. He doesn't necessarily know what they do as well as the founders. He definitely doesn't know how to sell it as well, but he knows people, and he wanted to show kind of that fearlessness. Just be willing to call, be willing to ask, what department should I talk to? I want to talk about XYZ, and just put yourself out there. And I think that was really special because it opened Jacob and I's eyes early on to the importance of kind of outbound sales, cold calling, cold emailing, and more. But more importantly, the culture building of showing your team you're willing to do anything you're asking them to do.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that's one of the things that Ted just does so well. That concept of leading from the front. He's so facey, and what I mean by that is like you see him at the front of his business, like doing whatever it takes. And I think that kind of willingness to get your hands dirty on the hardest jobs, showing your team members that you're willing to do it and how to do it, is a lesson I took from him too. That I think anyone in our industry can learn from and benefit from. So appreciate you kind of just walking through that connection to Ted. So you mentioned earlier that you sold your first product when you were 7 or something on eBay. Talk to me a little bit about like what was going on there, and then a little bit of your just kind of upbringing that had such an entrepreneurial itch, and what that was like.
Yeah, for sure. I always joke to people, it sounds fake, but thankfully I still have the same eBay account, and so I can still see the oh, you can't see it here, but it says member since 2003 up at the top there. It's real,
Okay.
which
Yep.
I was 7 years old, and so I wouldn't say it was an intentional journey, but I got a few Christmas presents that I was not perfectly satisfied with, and my reaction was, well, I've stumbled upon eBay. I've bought a few things there. I should try selling something there. And so I listed these products, just pulled like stock images off Google, sold them for maybe like 25% the retail value. And I'm like, it's free money to me. I didn't purchase these things. And then asked my parents, hey, can you drive me to the UPS or the post office and help me ship these? And hey, I don't have a bank account or any digital wallet. If you pay me some cash, can you transfer this out to your bank and you can give me some conversion ratio and save some money? And they were pissed. Who are you interacting with on the internet? It was a lot less trusted, I feel like, in the early 2000s. You're going to get kidnapped. What are you doing? We bought you these presents. They were worth a lot more than this. But thankfully, they've always been very supportive in terms of like, we want to enable our kids to follow their passions, learn from the front lines, experiential learning, and things like that. And so they kind of leaned into it. And I think at the time, it was just a function of, I'm very kind of like math, engineering oriented. I love everything kind of mechanical. I've always been breaking apart cars, car engines, car parts, phones, all sorts of things. My favorite show growing up was How It's Made. And so I was always trying to like get involved in building things, manufacturing things. And so I kind of started selling on eBay, just whatever I had around, whatever I could convince friends and family, like, oh, I'll consign that for you essentially. And I basically started quite literally the boring business of putting up those flyers that are like, we'll buy junk electronics and phones, computers and phones. And I was just breaking them down for parts and selling the parts on eBay, liquidating them, repairing some and selling them as working devices, because I was in middle school now at that point and I wanted to buy a nice phone, a nice computer, and that was my way to do it. Fast forward to high school, I wanted to buy my first car. And so I kind of pivoted to automotive parts. And hey, maybe if I get involved in this kind of value chain, I can learn more about it and eventually afford this. I actually bought my first car off eBay in eighth grade, way before I could drive, just using the few $1,000s I had accumulated, telling my parents, like, I'm going to repair this and restore this in our garage for the next few years until it works for me to drive. It was an old Toyota. Thankfully, it did. They ended up making me sell it because they were like, wait a second, do we really want our 16-year-old driving a car he just fixed himself in our garage and airbags and all sorts of things? But I'm going a little too detailed. I think the point is, I was trying a lot. I was trying to build apps in high school. I had tried to source so many different products. I was doing drop shipping on different websites. I had my own websites selling specialty Porsche, Mercedes, and Audi's parts. And all these were just kind of fun hobbies on the side of school. And really, as I was getting towards college, I was buying a lot of automotive parts. That was my main business in high school. And I approached this one company I was buying from, Hewco, and just said, "Hey, I'd love to meet your CEO. I'd love to get to know the business." I met their founder, or sorry, their CEO, Chris, who was from Germany but happened to be moving to Atlanta. They had a factory in Mableton, Georgia, and his kids were going into, I think it was middle school, and he wanted to give them some international experience. And they said, "He's actually going to come out to the U.S. in a few months. You should meet him at the factory." I think he laughed me out of the office almost of I was their youngest and smallest customer and basically, what is this? But like Ted, I'm very thankful that he believed in me and leaned in. And I basically said for 2 years after that, I'll do anything at this business. I want to work for you for free. I want to learn how you built this empire and just teach me your ways, so to speak. And it was kind of weeks before my summer before college, I got like 13, I think it was, or maybe it was more, plane tickets in my inbox out of nowhere. And I was just like, what is going on here? And he was like, all right, your job starts next week. You're going to fly to Germany for 2 months. Then you're going to go do this and this and this. And so it was Germany, France, Mexico, Canada, Enterprise, Alabama, Mableton, Georgia. They had 23 factories or 21 factories in 19 countries. And I had to call them and be like, I have class starting in 2 months. I can't actually do this whole schedule, but let's figure it out. Let's move some of the flights. Let's do it. And that was an incredible experience. It was basically lean management in factories, trying to figure out how to reduce cycle time for the machines, how to reduce the amount of steps workers were taking, how to improve the throughput, how to reduce the maintenance for the machines. But really more, hey, Germany is our kind of like global standard. Go figure out a process playbook and kind of budget to get each other facility operating at that standard, because there was a lot of acquired facilities in that business. And so, I mean, I literally, my first week of class at Georgia Tech, took a 1-day flight back to Germany to do a presentation to their board, explain one of the budgets for the facilities, and come back. And I was joking to them, like, don't you know about online meetings? And it was just not part of their culture. And my point in sharing all of this depth is I was trying so much. I felt like I had so much work experience, but also I was at the front line, and it was just very hard to go back sitting exclusively in class and not working on anything, kind of as you and I were just talking about, and saying, you know what, I'm just going to start building something. And I didn't necessarily start Stored to say, this is going to be a massive startup. I'm going to raise venture dollars and so on and so forth. Just like the dozens of things I had tried prior, was more, here's a problem. Here's how in a very capital efficient way I can kind of insert myself in the value chain and get involved. And it started to grow from there.
I mean, it's fascinating. So what was it pretty clear to you then, almost from day one at college, that this was not going to be your path, and that, you were meant to be kind of in the thick of, in the arena, kind of building and fixing and doing things? I mean, how did you think about the kind of traditional path of going to school, given that, you'd been homeschooled in the past, and, within a week of getting on campus, you're planning day trips to Germany?
Yeah, I think he definitely screwed me up when it came to college. I think that really threw a wrench in it. But I was very fortunate that I'd gotten into some great schools, some very expensive schools, an Ivy League or two, and I was looking at that more like, wow, is this really the culture I want to go to? Do I want to go be in this college town so isolated away from kind of the city, the vibrant environment, frankly, connections I had made, like Chris at that point, and saying I'm going to go reset somewhere. So I was incredibly fortunate that I had both the in-state and then the dean scholarship at Georgia Tech. So it was free for me, and I even had some capital from that scholarship that was helpful for housing and off-campus things like that too. And so that was very much my like initial like, okay, I'm going to college for free. It's an incredible school. I'm not gonna say I don't like college. I'm not gonna go. But once it started to be the trade-off of the business was growing, I started at first semester freshman year. I took my summer off and my first semester sophomore year off just to work on the business. So I only completed I think 3 actual class semesters at Georgia Tech. But by that third one, when I wrapped up and I was actually starting a fourth, the business now was a few million in revenue. We were raising our $2.5 million seed round. I had employees at an office I was going back and forth to multiple times a day. And I just felt a little bit like an analogy, maybe like an athlete, where I'm like, am I really going to not take my offer to go pro because I really just want to round out my degree first? Like, the switching cost or trade-off cost of not pursuing this opportunity right now when I've already grown it as much as I can while doing both is going to be something I regret. And I've always loved the kind of regret minimization framework of like, go to your 80, 90 on your deathbed. Which of these two would you regret more? And I was like, I will definitely regret not going all in on the business. And my simple statement to myself and to Georgia Tech, who was incredibly gracious about it. I mean, since then I've given the commencement speech. I'm on the board. They just invested in the business. Like, they've been incredibly close to us, and I'm very thankful for that. What I said to them was, "This is not at all that I don't believe you're a great school. It's simply opportunity cost, and I can either do two things okay with part of my ability, or I can go all in on one thing." And I think we all know going all in on one thing is really the way you get alpha and maximum outcome for it. So let me do this now, and I'd love to come back if anything doesn't work. Thankfully, it started working, and we were growing rapidly. But it's kind of funny because I did get the Teal Fellowship, which is the kind of Peter Thiel pay you to drop out of college for at least 2 years, et cetera. But I did get it after I was already been dropped out of college for over 2 years. I was kind of like, sure, I'll take the capital and the network, but I kind of already stepped out on my own.
I mean, I was going to ask what it was like trying to convince your parents, family that, this was the move, but you just so eloquently explained the kind of pros and cons that I feel like it probably wasn't that hard for you.
I think I had to give everything I just said plus a little bit more. I promise I'll go back if it doesn't work. Don't worry. This will just be a 1 or 2 semesters. We'll see what happens. But I think that it was right around that $2.5 million seed round, which was incredibly validating to them and my whole family. And again, they were supportive from day one. And by the time I think that it would have been necessary to maybe consider what's next, we were raising our Series A, which ended up $12.5 million, a great firm, Kleiner Perkins, and even my parents had heard of it from kind of decades of being around and maybe seeing it on the news or things like that. And so I think all those proof points just continued to make them say, amazing. But even that statement sounds like there was some hesitance for them. I would give them all the credit in the world that it's all back to that kind of like experiential, lifelong learning. They were very much like, we don't want to spend our money on like your frivolous, flashy, fancy, fun type stuff. We want to spend it on education and you getting hands on and experiencing things for yourselves, making money for yourselves, and so on. And so I think that so long as they knew I had the right intention and, and a good path, they weren't overly fearful of leaving school.
Are you looking to grow your brokerage? Are you struggling to land new customers in these challenging market conditions? Look within. So many companies that tender you freight throughout the domestic United States also have business coming out of Mexico. A year ago, I understand why you might not have seen that freight as an opportunity. But today, Cargado exists. And that means any load coming into or out of Mexico is now an opportunity for you to support. In just over a year, I've been able to see Cargado go from ideation to launch to rapid growth.
It's amazing to see how many logistics companies have been able to use Cargado to expand into Mexico to grow their business. Cargado is the first platform that connects logistics companies and trucking companies who are moving freight into and out of Mexico. If you move Mexico freight or are planning to, reach out to Cargado today at cargado.com. That's CARGADO.com. So take me to the kind of original idea for Stored and how it came about.
Yeah. So one of our core values today is learn and iterate, and it very much comes from this exactly that we've always said we're very solution. Exact opposite. We've always said we're very problem obsessed, meaning we want to make sure we're fixing this problem, and we're happy to be flexible about the solution and the details. And so we've taken a winding path over the years. And if you kind of snapshot Stored at any given time, we look somewhat like a different business. And so my kind of starting insight was I was working at this automotive manufacturer after having done multiple e-commerce businesses myself. The automotive manufacturer was mostly like in facility process improvement, but they did ask a final project towards the end, which was how do we reduce our inventory on hand globally? And I started to dig into okay, we got these 23 factories. I think it was two of them have their own warehouse on site, but the rest of them are raw goods in, lancing and machining lines all the way through, and staging to put it on trucks to go out. Meanwhile, while we do sell to small and mid-size customers and wholesalers, a lot of their customers were very big automotive OEMs. And so a lot of them had safety stock requirements and more. And so we had all these warehouses, 3PLs, holding so much inventory. And so I started to dig in and say, okay, well, we have dozens of global 3PLs. They're all different companies from Kuehne+Nagel and Expeditors and GXO and to local 3PLs in different markets. And all of them are on different warehouse management systems that none of them are really integrated back into our NetSuite. And so we have plant managers sending emails back and forth with them every day to coordinate truckloads, to coordinate inventory levels. And how am I supposed to reduce inventory on hand if we don't even know really what inventory we have where? We have a maybe twice a year accurate view when we do these kind of bank walkthroughs and audits and cycle counts. And then every day after it starts to creep and slip to inaccurate again. And so the founding premise was basically okay, the problem here is that whether I was a small merchant myself or this large business, everybody is trying to keep up with Amazon like supply chains, meaning rapid deliveries, good tracking and visibility to the customer, simple returns, and low costs. And that premise is now driving so much of the consumer behavior. I think back to my days of eBay and Amazon and my own websites, and probably 60% of my reviews were about shipping experience. And I'm like, I'm just dropping this off at this post office like everybody else. Why am I getting so much reviews based on this? And it's because over the last 2 decades, these giants like Amazon have realized consumers used to walk into a retail store, you swipe your credit card and you walk out with your product, you know where you're going to go return it and you trust it. Well, today you're walking out of that storefront online, swiping your credit card and walking out with nothing besides trust. And your trust is entirely, am I going to get this product when I thought? Is it going to be what I thought, undamaged, the right quantities, the right size, so on? Am I going to have the easiest visibility through that process and the simplest returns if anything goes wrong? And these companies like Amazon, Walmart, Target, and more are investing tens of billions of dollars in solving that. Yet it's creating this massively uneven playing field for everybody else, where as a small to mid-sized to even large merchant, you just don't have the economies of scale and the volume to offer rapid deliveries at that cost and build out all this integrated tech. And so you go out to the internet and you either run into Amazon saying, order this now, get it by 8 a.m. tomorrow, or you run into the majority of websites saying $7 for 5 to 10 day delivery. Hope that's good enough for you. And so we kind of looked at that problem and said, well, what's really preventing it? And are preventing brands of all sizes from having prime like logistics. And our premise was really it's two or three problems. One, they don't have the scale. So, how can we combine the scale of many merchants to offer the package volume necessary to get Amazon like speeds and costs? Two, they don't have the network. Typically, these companies are dealing with one or two different 3PLs. They have one warehouse on the East Coast, maybe the same one on the West Coast, but they don't actually have like a flexible, self healing network that they can keep moving inventory across nimbly to actually stock inventory in, let's say, 5 to 10 points, even closer to customers. And then three, technology. All of that network is typically on disparate warehouse management systems, but a brand doesn't really operate off a warehouse management system. They're operating out of their Shopify or their ERP or their QuickBooks. And then they're trying to figure out, how do I integrate all this down into all these logistics systems that hopefully I can stay out of as much as possible? And I would just note that these brands we're dealing with and e-commerce fulfillment is a lot different than, let's say, a factory manager, a manufacturing manager, or even a trucking manager at one of these brands who is used to constantly dealing with their different trucking companies, and they have the time to coordinate each load. You don't have time to coordinate every single one of the 5, 10,000 e-commerce packages you're getting a day. You need kind of a platform and an automated solution. But long story short, they don't even live in the WMS. And so, what are they even integrating all those systems back to? Shopify directly, random data lake they're making and trying to create rules about when to send it to the East Coast warehouse versus the West Coast warehouse. So, what if we build the vertically integrated system, the WMS that runs the fulfillment centers, the TMS that runs the parcel last mile, the OMS that orchestrates that network to do inventory planning, order planning, routing, parcel selection, trying to make sure you always have your inventory in the cheapest and most optimized points. We're always routing orders to the cheapest and most optimized points. And then finally, the consumer experience layer, which is, once we have this, we can actually talk to the customer more like Amazon, and in the cart, power that delivery promise, those shipping options, the post purchase tracking emails, and the full stack returns portals. And so we really combine those three pillars to provide prime like logistics to brands of all sizes. And our pitch is very much, hey, don't go set up a data center, tap into the cloud, tap into AWS, Azure, GCP, or other. Don't go piece together your 3PLs, your different pieces of e commerce technology and OMS and more. Just tap into us as an infrastructure as a service to get the fastest, cheapest, most optimized deliveries. I know, super long answer, but I would really just round out as, we had to pair that. How do we compete with Amazon like delivery with, well, we're two 18-year-olds, we have no capital, and we don't have billions of dollars to go build a prime like network, and we don't have all the scale necessary to get that package volume and speed and cost we want. And so we kind of had to step dramatically back from that whole mission and say, well, what's like the smallest thing we can do to start? And we had a strategic perspective that, out of this kind of end-to-end Amazon-like value chain, what is it that makes them so much better than everyone else? It's the fulfillment centers. And that is where they control the speed and cost the most in terms of the journey. They can't really change where the product's manufactured. They can't really change where the consumer is, but how optimized that facility location is does speak to speed, cost, and distance the most. So if we start there, not only is it a market that not a lot of people have tapped. So we were looking at the time saying, well, you have networks and technology in freight brokers and freight companies. Who is the kind of warehouse network and broker out there? There isn't really one. So what if we build a network of facilities, build the tech into them to standardize their operations, the inventory reporting, and more, and from there begin to grow out from just partner warehouses to warehouses in last mile to warehouses last mile and inbound trucking to launching our own fulfillment centers to building this top to bottom tech. And it gave us the ability to kind of have a wedge to start and keep expanding and growing from there. But as a result, we're very much kind of like a company of different building blocks or chess pieces we're constantly trying to move, saying, we didn't really even reach our initial vision and value prop to customers probably until 2022 or 2023, after starting in 2015. And over the last 2, 3 years since then, it's why we've been growing even faster, enhancing our unit economics even faster, and winning even more in the market. Because once you have this kind of moat of scale, technology, and network, and the value prop you want, it's very hard to compete with for the traditional, let's say, fulfillment 3PL.
So that's so fascinating to me. I mean, I think it's so interesting how you were able to kind of digest and understand the end goal at such an early stage, and yet know that as two 18-year-olds or however old you were at this point, like, you were so far away from that end goal. But like, I'm just curious about the idea of kind of taking bite sizes at a time, focusing on the fulfillment early, seeing that was where you could wedge yourself in. Um, what was the experience of kind of navigating selling the dream to potential customers while only having 5-10% of that kind of product developed? Um, my understanding in selling software is when you're selling an unfinished product is extremely challenging. Nobody wants to be the guinea pig um, of some big expensive software or just big software in general. So I'm curious, what was that experience like? Those early days of trying to land customers? How hard was it, given that you were kind of committed to a dream that was very far away?
Yeah. And I think two other important points in that are one principle we agree with a lot, which is a lot like that kind of like regret minimization. And we steal a lot of these, and we're not making these up. Amazon has some great leadership principles that we try to learn from. Another one is they do these kind of PR FAQs. Go to the end, write the press release of like what this dream product looks like, write some happy customer quotes, etc., and then build a plan of working backwards from that. How do you get there? Instead of standing here and say, how do you work forward? What's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing? And I think that's a little bit of how we said, okay, well, this is the vision, but we can't actually provide this. What can we provide today? And the second point would be, I think that was the most kind of crucible moment for us because, frankly, at the time, there was, and I think you and I could have some fun debating this topic, or we might be on the same page. There was a lot of pressure on, well, there's all this excitement around this digital freight broker or this digital freight forwarder. And why aren't you doing these segments? And we were kind of scratching our heads saying, well, we already know, especially being part of Dynamo, we already know some very successful freight brokers, and we're pretty sure a lot of them use technology. And my point in that is more, we really thought about the kind of value and ROI of what's your right to win depending on where you start. And uh, uh, when you want to make this argument of we're going to be this very tech enabled business, when you're in freight, let's say, and we still move freight today. When you're in freight, let's say ocean, you might be talking about $5,000 Shenzhen to LA. And if you have let's say 10,000 units on that boat, you're spending 50 cents per unit. And when your average brand has 92 days of inventory on hand, and you can't really use tech to say, I'm going to make the boat go faster, it's very hard to actually kind of charge more or get even better pricing power or so on just because you have a little bit more technology for that ocean movement. What it can help with is decreasing the cost to manage the load, which is internal enablement, which is great, but it's not as much customer facing, let's say. And similarly on trucking, when you're going to then take that from the LA port to your warehouse in Las Vegas, you may be spending $500 on that truck or $1,000. You may be spending 5-10 cents per unit at that point. And then when you go to ship it to a consumer's house, which is really more our kind of core, you may be spending $7 to $10 shipping that single individual unit. And you're not talking about, hey, I can't really change the speed of that boat or truck. You're talking about, hey, I can really change the speed of that package delivery from 7 days to 1 or 2 days on average. And hey, that $7 is actually like 15% of your economics as a business, your margin, your total revenue is spent on that last mile fulfillment and returns. And so I can really enhance your gross margins. And so when delivery speed is so much of your CAC with the consumer, so much of your margin with the order, and so much of your lifetime value and repeat shopper rate, and you can actually impact the outcome. That was our whole argument early on of like, we got to start in the warehouses. It feels like the place to go. And thankfully, 5-10 years later, it really proved, I believe, to be the right approach in comparison, where you can be an incredible freight or ocean company. Those are incredible services. And we work with a lot of partners. But the kind of here's how it's going to be transformed with technology pitch, I think we can both acknowledge, struggled in some of them to really get where they wanted. And so I kind of deviated heavily from your actual question, but we had to be very introspective at the time. And frankly, we were getting a lot of flack of like, why aren't you growing as fast as that digital freight broker? Why aren't you growing as fast as that company? And we're like, well, we're growing a lot faster than our incumbent peers and than a lot of our direct competitors, but we're not really quite as much selling a commodity, which you can throttle based on pricing. And so that was interesting early on, because I do think that as a founder, you get tested a lot where it's like, how much conviction do you really have in what you're saying right now? Because I, as an investor or so on, I'm going to pass on you or push you harder on this and tell you you're wrong, until only time will tell over the next few years who was actually right.
So I haven't thought about it the way you just described it, and it's a fascinating thing to recognize. Like, you kind of saw everyone going one direction and thought, I don't really think it makes sense to go that direction. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, here we are 10 years later, and um, everybody's gung ho about your business with everything you just, your recent announcement, the fundraise, and then, talk about digital freight brokers. You hear that term more often used in a graveyard than you do on podcasts these days. So I just think that's really interesting. Now, if I remember correctly, like, the business initially was kind of like an asset light warehousing network, essentially. And that was early days. And now you've, as you mentioned, pivoted, but I think really more evolved is the right way to think about it, where you own facilities, you license out the software, if I'm correct. Can you talk about kind of the evolution of the business and um, kind of some of the bigger changes you've made over time strategically, and like why those changes were made?
Absolutely. I think that going back and kind of combining with your prior question, it was a function of like, well, what building blocks can we solve? And I had a great friend, another early mentor, one of those people I reached out to, and Andrew McConnell in Atlanta. And he walked me through a story of his business, which was an online platform for rentals. And he basically said, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars at a web development and software development agency to build our initial MVP. We put it out there. We got zero transactions through that platform after a year. Then we made a Google spreadsheet and started listing all the properties and rentals we knew of and inviting people to collaborate. And we got to millions of dollars of transactions in a matter of months. Why? We made it simple. We learned the user behavior. We learned what they cared about. We didn't have a brand that people trusted to go to this website and book, but they trusted us kind of hand to hand talking to them. And from there, we built a website, we built the platform, designed it around that flow, and grew it dramatically. And so that was very kind of stuck in my head, because when we started, you're spot on. Well, actually, I would even acknowledge a little even more naivety, which is I don't even think we knew what to build. We said, okay, we gotta build this software, this kind of order management layer in the middle, but like, what do the brands even care about? Inventory, orders, okay, that seems obvious. Well, what else? And so we actually started day one. Let's contact warehouse partners, because again, to be a prime like network, I'd say like at minimum you need uh, uh, upwards of like 6 facilities if you want a really rapid delivery, be able to position inventory correctly. And if you want to estimate that on the low end, each facility is maybe $5 million, and on a high end, maybe 25+ million dollars. We definitely couldn't go open 6 facilities. So we said, we're going to do this asset light. We're going to go partner with existing operators. And day one became like, let's cold call fulfillment centers and warehouses. And we kind of thought we were giving them this Airbnb, Uber like pitch of like, hey, we want to pull you onto a network. We want to kind of manage the customer service, manage the payments. We learned a lot of kind of the pitching to them from kind of that freight broker background of, we'll manage the insurance, the payment flow, the customer service. You just manage the capacity, provide us good service, and we'll keep you happy. And it wasn't very Airbnb and Uber like, because Airbnb or Uber are calling you saying, use your home or your car for the first time to do this. We're calling businesses who are set up to do this. So they're like, of course, sure, bring me customers. I'll talk to you when you bring me a customer. We're like, okay, we don't have as much to convince there. We just got to bring them demand. That's all they care about. And so it became, okay, we got to go find the volume and find the demand. And that's really where the kind of cold calling, emailing, hand to hand sales started. And frankly, uh, I do a lot of founder led sales now. I'm always talking to prospective customers. I'm always jumping in with our sales team, but I was shy and embarrassed of like, I don't want our customers to think we're this tiny business. So I was just Sean, a salesperson at Stored, reaching out saying, hey, we'd love to work with you. We did some crazy things. We scraped online lists. We built a scraper that went through every bill of lading at the US document website that tracks all the import records into the US. We got tens of thousands of phone numbers and emails. We started blasting them, calling them all the time. We were getting crazy responses like, "This is a military base. How did you get this email address?" We were getting some funny ones. But our pitch was basically, hey, we haven't built technology yet, but we have a network of now, I think it was maybe 25, 50 warehousing partners that have agreed to our kind of terms of service, insurance, et cetera. We're managing the network. We can make you flexible across them. So we had a pitch also of like 56% of warehousing contracts are 3+ year agreements. All of these are going to be month to month. We've negotiated entire flexibility for you. And so our first customers were actually a lot of Chinese based importers into the US who started saying, "Oh, great, because I have no idea geographically where I should be in the US, what the good prices are. I don't want to manage the time zone difference. Like, you manage this for me." And we said, "Okay, well, we're going to build technology around you." And they said, "That's fine. I'm just doing it over email with my 3PL warehouses today. So if you can just do it over email and spreadsheets, I'm happy. If you can build technology, I'm really happy." And that was just kind of starting volume. We went way more B2B at first because we said it's a lot easier to manage pallets in and pallets out of a warehouse on spreadsheets and emails than when you're in the thousands of orders a day per brand and every minute counts and getting that package out the door. You just can't. And so let's start very B2B. Let's just get volume flowing. And if the only value prop we can have today is a flexible network, fine. And then we started building the tech. And from 20 kind of end of 2015, early 2016 through really end of 2018, that's all we were. We were just a network of partner warehouses, getting that initial volume, getting trust from brands. And we got to our kind of Series A in 2019, and we were maybe 10 to 20 million of revenue, maybe 10 million of revenue. We had some real customers, but we were still just holding pallets of goods everywhere. And we said, all right, it's time to do two things. We want to, one, go heavily into e-commerce. We have enough of the technology now where we can manage a higher order volume. And then two, we don't want to just be the dots on the map, all these warehouses. If we want to be the Prime-like network, we have to be the dots, but also the connecting points. And so we got to be able to rebalance inventory between facilities. So we got to open a trucking division, and we got to be able to do the last mile out. And that's really the big part. If we think about stored transportation, trucking is a very small part of our business. Because it's more, hey, we're happy to move inventory between facilities, but if you want to get an inbound, your international forwarder, your customs, your freight broker can probably handle it. If you need us to do the drayage, we're happy to. But a huge part of our business is that last mile. And so over those next few years, it became, okay, we're going to build the trucking volume. We're going to build the asset light network. But as we started to get into this high velocity e-commerce segment, we won a customer. One of our first high volume e-commerce customers was doing over 10,000 orders a day, which is a pretty big customer. That customer, frankly, we did not perform well for in our kind of asset light partner facilities, because all we were was this order management software integrating down into the existing WMS of these partners, whatever their processes were, and so on. And we really realized, okay, if we want that Amazon-like value prop of fastest, cheapest, best in the world, we got to be willing to do this ourselves. Kind of back to that Ted Alling comment of, if we're going to go to our partners and say, you got to relay out your facility, you got to use our WMS we want to build now, not just let us integrate into your WMS. And you're going to listen to us about how to run the facility, how to staff the facility, the SLAs that matter. Who are we to tell you that when we're just in an office in Midtown? We've never run a warehouse in our life. And so that was our initial pitch to our investors. Hey, we're breaking the asset light model. We're going to go open our own one facility, and we're going to use it to build our own WMS, to figure out the best in class engineered processes, layouts, and more, and use it to build trust with all of our other partners. So if you go look at that press release years ago, it was like Stored launches its only innovation center in Atlanta. And quickly, customers just fell in love with it, and so did we. They loved the value of, wait, I have some dedicated stored nodes where I'm guaranteed the capacity, the quality, the standards, but then you have the network where you can be flexible and you can push me to the edge and you can cross-dock for me in this, that, the other. The WMS we built was starting to enable us to just watch the cost per unit to go down and down and down. Still today, every month and quarter, it's better, faster, cheaper. And so we just said, well, let's double down on this. Just because we started saying asset light doesn't mean we have to stay that way forever. And it's funny because even today, we still get the like, aren't you guys asset light? Why do you have these facilities? We're like, we are asset right is the joke we make. whatever our customers want and whatever best serves the business, that's what we want to be. We don't want to be like, well, we're either this or this, and we're not going to touch the other. And that same thing goes to, we're very software plus fulfillment. We have actual software ARR as part of our revenue, but then actually all of our revenue is driven by our software. And that's another one where it's like investors want you to be one or the other. And we're like, if this is the customer, they're happy with what we're providing them, that's all we care about. And you can see that in the results of our business.
Attention freight brokers and 3PLs, Greenscreens.ai is transforming how freight professionals price and quote freight. With AI-powered pricing and real-time market intelligence, Greenscreens delivers accurate, reliable predictions to help stay competitive in a constantly shifting market. Whether managing spot rates or long-term contracts, Greenscreens empowers brokers to quote with confidence and boost profitability, removing the guesswork from freight pricing strategies. Trusted by over 220 brokerages, Greenscreens is leading the way in the future of freight pricing. And now there's Illuminate, Greenscreens' latest product designed to shine a light on deeper freight market insights. Illuminate provides unparalleled visibility into spot and contract freight trends, giving users a clearer view of pricing fluctuations and market conditions to inform smarter, more profitable decisions. Visit greenscreens.ai/thefreightpod and discover how Greenscreens and Illuminate can help win more business more profitably.
So asset right is as good of a joke about asset as I've ever heard. I've heard some good ones before, when people are like, oh, you have assets? And they're like, my assets are my people, like things like that. But asset right, I've never heard, and that was really good. What I'm kind of I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. And a big difference in the business I built, or my team built, was like, we kind of knew our path from the onset. We just knew if we keep doing what we're doing, it will work. What I'm really curious and fascinated by is you had this kind of flexible storage business that seemed to be working to some extent. I mean, you had 10 million in revenue ish, and such a massive change in your strategy in investing heavily in building out this other technology, and then going and getting your own space. I'm just curious how you think about such significant decisions. Was there any part of you that was a little more risk averse, that thought, hey, this is kind of working, maybe we should just stick on this path of flexible warehousing and get it to 30 and then 50 and 100 million? So was there any part of that? And also, are there any big decisions you've made over the years that just you weren't right and invested heavily in something that didn't work? And what was that process like? So two separate questions, but kind of tangential.
Yeah, really good one. And I think it also speaks to just me as an entrepreneur. And I don't mean that in a good way. I just mean that for right or wrong in my style. I think I'm very impatient, unfortunately, and a little distracted sometimes. Just very, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and so we're kind of always stacking more value on top. The thing I've always reiterated though is, as long as we're in the same mission and the same customer, that's where I'm comfortable. If we start to deviate and say, well, we could launch this division, or we could start serving this other customer, or so on, that's where I get very uncomfortable, because I'm like, we understand this customer and we understand this problem. That's what we can keep kind of iterating and pivoting behind. But you're spot on, where not all these have played out perfectly. And there's been a lot of things we've shut down and stopped doing, and or a lot of times where we got a lot of flack for, is this the right strategy? Why are you going that way? And we had to just lean in with that conviction. A few examples. So like from the asset light to our first facility perspective, that was a huge debate. There were a lot of our investors, partners, and more who were like, this is your worst idea yet. You're ruining the whole foundation of why you're different, what you've built, and so on. And we just had to say, you might be right, but we at least have to try this based on all these other qualities. And if it doesn't work, we'll figure that out and we'll undo it. And there's other examples of that too, where the opposite has occurred. So I talked about trucking and said, we're not the biggest in trucking. We'll do any in-network moves. So we'll do rebalancing between facilities. We'll do direct injection to our parcel partners. We'll do zone skipping. We'll do some drayage if customers want, but it's just not really our focus, because it's not as tied to our kind of e-commerce fulfillment where we really focus with these brands. And there's incredible companies that's all they do. But when we got into trucking in 2019, or at the end coming into 2020, uh, there was a time when anyone wanted any capacity anyone could offer. And so our trucking brokerage went to almost 100 million in revenue in 12, 18 months. And we're like, oh, well, this is amazing. This is exciting. Great.
Like, this is easy.
This is the easiest business in the world. What is Andrew talking about all the time? I'm just teasing.
You're good.
But if we really step back, we look at it and say, like, wow, the margins we had were horrible because we don't know what we're doing. The customer experience we're offering is not really better than others. It's just people need capacity right now. And so even still, when that division was pretty large, we were looking at it and going through like, well, this is what we want to be when we grow up, from a value prop to customers up here. I'm literally thinking about our board slide. This is the value prop we wanted to have for customers. And these are the financial qualities we want to have to equal the kind of long-term outcome we're hoping for. And here's why trucking as a big business is incongruent with that. It's not our kind of margin profile. We typically sign 3 to 5 year contracts now, and it's all kind of day-to-day bidding. We don't plan to invest any of our R&D team behind building software for our trucking brokerage. So we're falling behind all these companies that's all they're doing, and they're so dedicated and focused to this. Long story short. And something that I had personally fought for our board and investors, like, we're going to open a trucking division. We're going to go do this. Every day was looking at our load boards, looking at our volume, looking at all the metrics, talking to brands. I ended up, when it was maybe now down, maybe like 50 million, shutting it down and just saying, hey, we're going to start directing customers to a partner, but instead, it's not for us. We'll do the moves we have the right to win, not let's just go be everyone's freight broker. And so that was a hard one, but it was also a really powerful one because it showed the team, like, we're willing to undo decisions that weren't right, and we're willing to stay focused. And the amount of focus we got after that was just so dramatic. There's one other one where I commented on it a little bit, where I said, I don't like selling differently. And at one point we said, well, let's go sell all of our tech to other 3PLs. That'd be a great idea. And it's not that it's a bad idea, but it all of a sudden created this division internally of, well, these are the people talking to 3PLs and warehouse operators and owners, and they know how to sell to them. They know how to customer service them. They know how to build products for them. And it's entirely different than our core 90% of the business or more customer. And so same thing, we shut it down and said, well, it's working. People are liking it. It's growing, but it's creating so much tension and division internally that maybe this is when we're just so massive. One day we'll do this. But I really think that my kind of principle is, as long as we're operating in a mission we know, with a customer we know, and we're very thoughtfully making very light bets, and when they work, growing them rapidly, we'll do it. And so we're very kind of we're even still, we're trying to create playbooks for, like, how do we launch new products and divisions internally, because it's true, we have our partner network of warehouses, we have our own fulfillment centers, we have last mile delivery, we have returns, we have some trucking, we have packaging, we have value add services like embroidery, cleaning, all sorts of things. We have different softwares like our OMS, our consumer experience software, our shipment protection, which is an insurance that a consumer can purchase in the cart. There's a lot. And so it is a lot to keep track of. And even just right before this, it's a meeting going through kind of product adoption, engagement, and success metrics across all of those, for basically, like, how's the investment, how's the bet, how's the adoption going across the whole base.
That's incredible. I mean, so thank you for sharing the level of depth you did around some of those decisions. I completely see, on the trucking example, why that is kind of doesn't jive with the rest of your business, or at least the profile you're trying to build out for your business. What's the process for making a decision like that in general? If you're thinking about, I mean, you just laid out, I don't know, 15 different service offerings or value offerings. How do you decide what the next one's going to be, if there is going to be a next one? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, it's a good question, because part of it is throwing darts at the wall and vision of, here's what we think the market wants. But then we've gotten more disciplined over time to say, we have all these thoughts written down, but let's only really lean in when customers say something. And I think that if I could credit Stored with anything, I do think we're incredibly customer obsessed. We try to just stay so focused on, like, let's put our blinders on, stop listening to anything external from investors, competitors, the market, whatever. Let's just listen to them. And as long as we're serving them, we'll be okay. And there's, again, another great Bezos Amazon quote of, as far as I know, my competitors have never paid my bills, only my customers. So that's who I'm going to listen to. And so today it's much more of a discovery process of kind of back to that. What do we have the right to win? And that's probably where we focus the most and say, like, okay, if we look at the kind of tech stack we are for the customer and the value chain we offer, what else are they leveraging around that? And that was a little bit of the thesis of, well, if we're the kind of OMS and all the fulfillment, we have all their inventory data, all their order data, all their consumer data, all their sales data. There's so many products, particularly digital products, software, built off those core elements. So if we can really win the OMS and the fulfillment network, we can start selling all these modules up here off the OMS. Or similarly in fulfillment, like starting with our network, then going into our own, we can start winning all sorts of things off that, like the inbound drayage, the last mile, the returns, the value add services, and the packaging. And so I think that for us, we try to think through, and we have a long list. We try to think through, are we actively hearing this from customers that they're looking for a solution? Or are we hearing a repeated solution where everyone's clearly adopting something in the market like they need it? Does it fit, again, that kind of value prop we want and metrics we want to live into in terms of like qualities of our business we want? And then, frankly, do we have the time and the capacity? And that's probably the hardest one, which is it is really hard to carve out people to go figure out a new business and instill that kind of entrepreneurialness in them of, well, here's how you start this new division. Here's how we're going to make measured bets and test your success and watch you in days and weeks, not in months and quarters like the broad business. And that's probably my biggest challenge always as a leader is I want to keep injecting new kind of products and new next phases of what we can become. And even today, we have a whole in like our board decks, in our investor decks, and in our internal memos for the company. We have like, hey, there's probably 4 acts for Stored, and building the Prime like fulfillment network, which all of this fits in, is really only act 1. We have other thoughts after that, and how we keep adding more value and more value, and that's what I love. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs I talk to, kind of like we were just talking before this, you kind of get in that like, well, what do I want to do next? And sometimes there's this like, I want to go launch a business, get out of it, launch a business, get out of it, launch a business. And I'm also think that's an exciting path and something I could be passionate about. But what gets me really passionate is also the compound businesses, back to my favorite, I'm going to sound annoying, Amazon, that start with one thing and then just keep adding more and more and more into perpetuity. And you kind of get to be an entrepreneur at scale where you don't have to do everything yourself to get something started. You don't have to, unless what you don't have to, what you're enabled with is a great team, capital, and customers to go test and iterate things off of. But again, there's a lot of pluses and minuses because if you do it wrong, you can quickly start to distract. You can quickly start to fragment your team. And in some ways, to your question of like, well, what if you just kept doing that partner asset light network forever? You can start to kind of give up the golden goose of like what made you so successful, what got you here, what is the core value. You can't stop focusing on it and get distracted by these other things. And so definitely pluses and minuses.
At Mola, we built a great company, and I'm proud of the work we did. We knew when to ask for help, and sometimes that meant going outside of our own company. I'm proud we built an ecosystem of trusted partners like Metaphora. When we needed differentiated industry expertise in business consulting or technology services, we looked at Peter, Ryan, and the team at Metaphora. They've consistently delivered value in the transportation and logistics space for over a decade for mid-market and enterprise brokers, for shippers, carriers, private equity, and freight tech companies. At Molo, we use Metaphor to solve problems we simply couldn't on our own. Metaphor is the only partner you should trust to help you win, whether that's doing ops and tech diligence, growing revenue, optimizing spend, or selecting and building software. Go check them out at metaphora.net. That's METAFORA.net. I'm curious about your own evolution. 10 years ago, or however long ago, you were 18 and you raised $2.5 million, and you and a partner and whoever else, but like you went out and started building, you personally. Now here we are this week, you just raised $200 million, which, we're going to talk about how you're going to deploy that. But you talk about building out new products and having trust in people to go build it, and, that process and how that's challenging. I just think about the 10-year journey from where you were at 18 to where you are today. What has your personal evolution looked like? What are you kind of most proud of in terms of your personal development? And then what have been the most challenging things for you to grow into in this role you're in today?
Yeah, I think that an investor said it well. I think it was Founders Fund in our Series B, which was the number one indicator of success in a founder or executive we've ever seen is just pace of learning, and how fast can you kind of see the next chapter and adapt to the next chapter. Because the opposite statement you often hear in Silicon Valley is building a team, which could include the founder, is like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. By the time you make it to one side, turn around and start over, because everyone is not going to be ready for the next chapter. And you're going to need different leaders for that next phase of growth. And so I think the thing I'm most proud about is making it through those phases of growth. And frankly, I just did a chat with Kleiner Perkins, one of our investors, in their podcast a few weeks ago. I think it's probably a few months out from releasing. And Ilya from Kleiner actually brought up that one time I called him in 2022 maybe, and said, am I the right CEO for this business? Like, do you believe that? Should we talk about it? And that's not me thinking I'm not. It was more a function of like, I want to make sure that we're iterating together, learning together. I'm keeping up with the pace. I don't want to be the bottleneck for this company. And so if I go back, I definitely was not the the leader and individual I am or aspire to be today. Back when we started the business, I mean, I was more the like walk in and start to stutter. You're nervous about the pitch, nervous about saying something wrong, and uh, frankly, back to Ted and Dynamo, like they helped beat that out of you for sure. I mean, they literally made us go stop. I think it was 25 people in a day on the street and just start giving them our pitch and have them sign something that that we gave it to them. And they made us go in pairs and find the busiest area we could and just start giving our pitch at the top of our lungs to everyone who would listen. And so, like, you definitely get more confident with or comfortable with public speaking and all those things. But long story short, I think if you go through the chapters, like the hardest thing when we started was to actually hire great people. We had incredible first employees, and that's not what I mean. But those are the early mid 20s who are willing to take that bet on these two 18-year-old crazies, willing to take the salary cuts, so on. Getting to real leaders and employees who had faced real chapters and challenges at businesses for 5 to 10 years, hiring our first leaders, that was incredibly hard because we barely had any money. This is maybe before, right, coinciding with that seed round. We didn't have a lot of credibility. We didn't have a lot of experience. And frankly, I mean, I literally got on an interview with someone who was supposed to be a sales leader interview once. Um, this was back when we just had a free office. There was like four of us. And he literally just said, I just want to stop the call before we start. I just read an article as I was prepping for this. Are you 19 years old? Like, are you kidding me that I'm going to work for you? And he hung up. I remember it. And I was like, okay, wow. Well, I should go find that guy today. But that's where uh, uh, finding the first leader, first our VP of engineering, and then our VP of supply chain, who today is our COO, were so incredibly transformative because they brought Amazon experience or a company called Better Cloud and Cloud Sherpas in Atlanta experience. So an incredible engineering leader, incredible operations leader, and it really started that snowball of hiring. But one thing I'm proud of is keeping up with that learning curve over time, but also some of our leaders. One of our first employees, our second employee, Alex Kent, still with the business. Steve Swan, who we hired as that VP of supply chain, poached him from Amazon. I almost dropped my phone when he told me what he was making at Amazon, saying, yeah, right, we can get this guy. And thankfully, he went all in on equity and wanted to build something. And
Smart.
I've only found out recently that he had an offer from one of our direct competitors who was bigger than us at the time, or better capitalized. We've now crushed since then. And he chose us just because he believed in the team, believed in how we were executing that much more. So those are some of the things I'm proud of. But I think as you really fast and still being here today as such a big leader in the business, same with my co-founder Jacob. But I think if you really fast forward, the chapters change, right? And like the hardest period for me was probably the 2022 to 2023 period, where what got us here isn't going to get us there. Meaning, we started the business 2015 to 2021 as kind of grow at all costs, just build, build, build. Who cares about margin or bottom line? We have all these venture dollars, everything's great. And the market changed dramatically. And it was, hey, those ridiculous multiples no longer exist. And people really want to see the proof point in the unit economics and the bottom line. And a lot of people won't make it to the other side. And so that's where, as a leader, you kind of have to really, like, the proudest part is back to what we were saying of like, you say, here's the 5 or 6 things we got to do over the next few years, but you also don't even know, are they right? You believe they're right, but you could be deeply wrong. And you have to be that convicted over multiple years saying, trust me, we're still charging through them. We're in the middle of turning the ship. And yeah, as we're turning, we're going to be pressing against turbulent water. It's not going to feel great, but we're getting on the right path. And if you fast forward from 2021, we were less than 50 million in revenue to today, we're over 10 times that. And from pretty red bottom line to profitable and real sustainable margins and customers and growing 70% a year and all these qualities, we can really zoom out and say that was the right approach. And so I think that that chapter is the hardest because you have to go from this like, I'm just this optimistic founder. Everything I'm doing is just more, more, more. I can go sell to customers and so on, but I'm not going to deal with a lot of these problems too. All I'm going to deal with is the problems. And all I'm going to deal with is the midline, the bottom line, every headcount, every customer decision, every pricing decision, every product decision, and trust and empower my team, but also get incredibly in the details and in the weeds. And I think that there's a kind of joke out there that like during a hard time at Facebook early on, Mark Zuckerberg said, for every day for the next year, I'm coming in a suit. And I think he did to show like we're serious. And we definitely didn't do that. There's a lot of rituals like that, from being in the office constantly to being all in the details of customers, spend, headcount approvals, and more. And back to like showing the team, if this is the hard work we're going to have to go through, I'm not sitting in some ivory tower telling you good luck. I'm in it with you, having as hard of a time with you, and helping personally try to rebuild each team and each function till we get to this place of greatness. And it kind of coincides simply with our product evolution too, which is, I think inherently since day one, we wanted a flywheel. We wanted this moat. We wanted to say, okay, there's some reason that as we get bigger, we get better and we get faster. But you don't have a flywheel day one. And we were saying it's going to be more package volume equals lower prices, faster speeds, and more trust between brands and consumers who have recognized or seen a delivery from store. And for the first 7 years, that was nothing. None of those were clicking, and we're just like, oh well, I hope eventually it starts working. And then now we can actually just watch them. I mean, we can look from 2021 to today and say, from a few million packages in 2021, maybe 2 million or a few million, to this year, we should be over 50 million packages, approaching 60 million packages. To cost, we're about 60% cheaper per order compared to that period in terms of our actual last mile and in building picking and packing. To speed, from 5+ days to 2-ish days on average, and that includes all international, weekend, et cetera, or 2 to 3 days if you include all those, with our best metros being next day. And then finally, trust. We delivered to 12% of US households last year, unique US households. We delivered about 1% of Black Friday, Cyber Monday. We won 41% of all new deals and customers we met last year because they had talked to another brand that uses Stored and had heard great things. And so we saw this start to click. And so kind of muddying the waters with a few topics, but I think a lot of this just comes down to like leadership and company building is having all these ideas and not knowing for years if they're actually working and clicking and paying off. And I think this round, this acquisition, and more is really just kind of the crucible moment where over a few quarters, all of our investors and a lot of the market saw, oh wow, it is really paying off, and what Stored said they were going to do is working.
It's incredible. It's very impressive. And that chapter you talked about it being the most challenging, the one where you kind of go from this environment where grow at all costs and you're a hero as long as that revenue dollar keeps going up and everyone wants to give you money, to the whole world kind of saying, yeah, maybe that doesn't make so much sense now. I want to see profit. It's a really hard pivot to navigate within a business that has historically raised quite a bit of money or done multiple rounds, um, especially because it's a delicate dance to do it in a way that allows your next fundraise or financial decision, to be one that doesn't look like a big down round or um, have challenging circumstances tied to it. So incredibly impressive for you to take the business to where it is today. Um, I guess what I'm curious about is like, how did you just this week or last week announced the $200 million raise plus the acquisition. I have a feeling those kind of were done hand in hand, and one maybe wouldn't have happened without the other. Um, but I am curious specifically about raising money coming out of the environment we were in, or as the chapter as you moved from one chapter to the next. Can you talk about just the thought process of how you got to the decision point to raise money? And if it is tied into the acquisition, then let's talk about that as well as kind of one thought process.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, which is it's also an incredibly isolating time, right? Like when you're going from the market or all these people telling you everything's amazing to everything's terrible, and what you've built is amazing, what you've built is terrible. You're like, what just happened yesterday? Um, and it's an interesting self-reflective period. And I think that over the kind of coming years after that, we really sat down and back to the working backwards. We quite literally. So when we did our seed round, Chad Byers from Sousa gave me really good advice, which was call every investor in this round on one call and say, what is the metric we all agree on will lead to our Series A? And that's the only metric we should all talk about and focus on. Of course, there's a million metrics under it, but like that should be the headline of every investor update. That is what we care about. Are we all aligned? I think that was good advice. It's a lot like that working backwards one where similarly, so 2022 happened. The market changed. We had just raised capital, and I think a lot of investors were confused because we called all of them and said, "Hey, we want to get your alignment because we know you just invested off of this plan and so on. But if you're watching the headlines like us, the whole world has changed, and that plan is going to have a very bad outcome for us next time. We're going to burn through all our money in the next 12 months and hope there's more." That's a little bit of a hyperbole, but my point
Yeah.
is just what we're going to get rewarded for has changed. And so I want to bring us all together and say, before we pivot our operating, let's agree on what we're working backwards from. And so I kind of went introspective, worked with some bankers, worked internally, and just said, like, what is the comp for us? What do we want to look like when we grow up again? That's where we really created those two buckets of that value prop we want and that those financial metrics that should match and kind of prove the value prop. And that's things like what's the level of GMV we want to power, meaning the merchant volume we're supporting? What's the level of revenue we want? What's the level of gross margin we want? What's the growth rate we want? What's the product attachment across customers we want? How many products on average per customer? What's the contract length we want to prove this is a real sticky solution? What's the profitability we want? What's the kind of like rule of 40 thereby we want? And like bluntly, we laid all those out and said, here are the metrics that we believe if we hit, we'll have a good next round. And if you look at where our metrics were compared to the ones we were putting out, it was like, oh, we're screwed. Good.
Nowhere near it.
Nowhere near it. Again, we said 500 plus million of revenue. We were less than 50. All these things, and it was like, good luck. Okay, very silent meeting, frankly. And I think just over a multi-year period, we just kept charging and finally hit those qualities and had a really good roadmap to do so and said, here's kind of strategically 2022, 2023, 2024, what we're going to do year by year to get there. and bringing everyone along for the ride. Frankly, while having a lot of debates with people along the way of, is that the right path? Is that the right path? And I don't think those debates stopped until maybe halfway through and starting to see, oh, wait, it is really clicking. It is really getting to where we thought it was. And so I think then the decision to raise more money really came from a perspective of, we said, let's use the capital we've raised like it's the last dollars that'll ever come into the business. And we have to stay alive forever. We have to get to profit off the dollars we have. And I mean, we did 3 different layoffs. Those were incredibly painful. It was very hard for our team to understand, wait, we just raised $100 million. Why are we doing a layoff less than 6 months later? The plans changed. What we're trying to execute, just because you have dollars, if you're spending at a certain rate, doesn't mean you have them forever. And so the thought process was, okay, we started to get profitable in the middle of 2024. We said, okay, let's go just build the forever balance sheet now with that profit, meaning let's go raise the right debt that can help us for working capital as we're now seeing large payment and APAR volume and so on. Let's go raise the right debt that could either help us with acquisitions in the future, help us with working capital. We don't know if the equity market is there yet. And we kicked that process off and ended up closing a $120 million debt facility. And during that time, which is a line of credit, it's not really burdening us, but we could tap it, which for capacity as needed. And in that process, we had created our materials, kind of we're talking to the market. A lot of investors started to reapproach us again and say like, hey, we keep hearing good things about Stored. Everything we're seeing coming out of you seems like you guys are launching new products, winning all these customers. We've talked to some of your peers and we're curious about you. And it kind of naturally kicked off. We had been saying, okay, in the middle of 2025, we'll probably raise our next round if the market's there as just like the permanent balance sheet, not because we need it, but because it gives us massive durability. And it ended up that we signed a term sheet in January with Strike Capital as they were excited about what we were doing and seen all that progress as we started to share materials and got super excited. And I think in that, it was a really interesting conversation because it was twofold from a capital need and evaluation. From a capital need, it was a little bit of a, we don't necessarily like need these dollars to survive, but if we want to build the lasting generational, potentially public company and win this mission and really separate ourselves from our peers and keep being aggressive when others are being conservative, that'll help us get the kind of permanent balance sheet. And then secondarily, from a valuation perspective, we actually started higher in the conversation with many them and others than the 1.5 billion that we landed on. And the logic was, well, we don't want to create any overhang again. We don't want to feel like we're growing into something and there's an existential crisis if we don't get there. We want to figure out what is kind of the right value from a capped downside, uncapped upside perspective that all of our shareholders in this round will make a lot of money if we're very successful with our plan. And we kind of outlined to them like, okay, we've raised X. That means our liquidation preference is Y, our revenue is Z. And so like even in our worst industry multiples, we should clear the amount of capital we've raised at our current valuation, profitability, our current revenue, profitability, and growth rate. So your downside is you'll probably at least get your money back in our bad case. Our upside is really uncapped because we're growing 70+%. We have this foundational platform that we think has a moat of capabilities, price, and quality. We're winning so many customers. We have this strong product market fit that's driving that growth. And we're still so small in the market we could serve. Even being over $500 million in revenue, we can be so much bigger. And margins. We've gone from this to this, but we still want to get to this, and that's even more alpha for you. So my point is, we actually want you investors to either potentially get some day one value, or actually participate in multiple expansion as we round out these last one or two financial qualities we want to be. I think that's what yielded a great round for both the investors and us. And I think we're incredibly proud, both by the lead and getting our existing investors like Kleiner Perkins and Founders Fund and Bond in. But what I'd really say we're proud of is also some of the very public investors, not like Franklin Templeton, who is already existing, but let's say Bally Gifford, who's basically like a Franklin Templeton of the UK, massive public asset manager, and really driving intense underwriting processes, really believing over 2 months maybe or plus most of these firms and getting to the conviction. And I'm way more proud of that than I am of the one day rounds that occur in 2021 where it's, oh, business is growing. What should we value at? Here's a term sheet.
Take some cash. Yeah.
Feels fine, but it doesn't necessarily feel like we earned this. And that's where I think we are today.
Yeah. This one feels much more validating. And where to go come up in this process? Was that like tied into this, or it just happened at the same time simultaneously?
Yeah, so actually totally unrelated to the capital raises, which is a strange timing on the announcement. But if a lot's going to happen, it's the whatever Murphy's law or whatever the right one would be for. It's all going to happen at once, basically.
Yep. Gotcha.
And I think that for us, it's a story of patience, and it's also a story of David versus Goliath. We're incredibly close with UPS, the corporate, but in many ways, Where to Go is launched because there were companies like Storage starting to grow and say, let's compete with that. And so, of course, when it happened, and we knew UPS at the time, but they said, we can't really be close anymore because we're actually doing this ourselves. We were terrified as maybe 20-year-olds at that time with a lot less capital. And I think when you fast forward and became multiple times the size, growing much faster, all these other qualities, we have now been relatively acquisitive. We've bought 3 fulfillment businesses before, Where to Go, now being our 4th. And in all of them, it's, well, if we look at those pillars of scale, network, and technology, we're really buying more network and more technology and more scale and bringing our technology. And for example, we bought a company called ProPack in Q2 of last year, and the revenue, the EBITDA, the customer happiness, just I wish I could share the metrics just through the roof. And that's been really the playbook for each acquisition, dropping in our consumer experience, OMS, WMS to run the business. And so we were kind of open-minded, but we were just growing so fast. We beat our last 4 quarters of sales targets. In the most recent quarter, we did 2.5x our target for the quarter. We were incredibly excited. And our board and us actually said, like, we're not going to do any acquisitions in 2025. We're growing so fast. Let's just keep our head down. But having known Where to Go since the day they started 7 years ago, and having kind of been in touch with the UPS leadership team over the last 24 months saying, hey, I think this could be a good idea for both of us. I think we could combine scale, combine network, bring our technology, and be the best in the industry together. It coincided with when it made sense for them. UPS has been focused on their core and ultimately not, back to what I said, not distracting with separate missions or customer bases is a big thing for companies like them as much as it is for companies like us. And so we just determined we could be stronger together. And so to go from existential crisis, and I'm talking like literally a family group chat where someone's like, has everyone seen this company launched by UPS? Should we all be worried about Sean? To, hey, we actually own that company now, and UPS is a great partner and a strategic partner now of ours moving forward. That's a proud one too. And I've used proud a lot on this, which I don't feel like I lean into as much, but it's more just when there's something so uncertain and you decide to see it through and it pays off, that's the moment that feels the best, I think.
100%. I mean, because only you can look at like can take a moment and look at the 5 years or 8 years of work that got you there. And people often focus on the work itself, like the time and energy put into doing something, and not as much time is thought about the uncertainty and the stress and the risk and the concern that you feel as the one responsible for the decision, as the one pushing the decision on everyone. And like, you believe in it, but you don't know for sure it's going to work. And so like, to be able to sit in a moment and say, like, I see, like, to see all the time that went on, but all that worry, the concern, the risk, the stress, no one feels or understands that the way that you do. So that's, I think, one of the reasons that you can be so proud of seeing something come to fruition like that. It's hard to even put into words the years of feelings that come with that. But I understand it. So I
So
get it.
you know it as well as anyone. But no, I totally agree. And I think you did say it well. It's just, I was talking to someone about that the other day. It's like, why do founders have asymmetric outcomes in terms of if it goes well, it can go really well for them. And it's frankly like, because while someone could judge the time and say like, did he work that many more years or hours than I did? And I'd like to think I worked very hard. it's more that like the constant existentialism, the constant will I fail tomorrow, the constant I have thousands of people whose families rely on me, the constant I'm telling them all here's why we're making this decision, and do they believe it? It's all that uncertainty, risk, and more that you have to live with every day, which you have to have like a little screw loose to want to live with it, maybe. But and it's hard, and it goes back to that period was challenging, and I think we're incredibly proud of where we are today, but more than anything, with what it means for our customers to actually really live into the vision to where we are providing them the product or service we set out to, but we could not at first. And hearing that back from them and hearing that feedback, watching that NPS and the value for customers just keep going up year after year, watching that win rate go from single digits to teens to 20s to 40 last year, which I think is incredibly high. I'm hopeful we can maintain, but it's hard. The customers validating us always feels 10 times better to me than the investor validating, because that's who's going to keep paying my bills forever if I don't ever go tap that investor again.
I feel like investors' pride, like getting kudos from an investor feeds the ego, but getting it from a customer, that like feeds the soul, because that's where you really do the work. And so when you see it and hear it from a customer, you're like, holy cow, this symphony I'm orchestrating is like really working. Like, the time and energy, everybody's really doing a good job. And we're actually catering to the people we're trying to. When the investor does it, I think it feeds the ego more. It's like, I mean, maybe this was just a me thing, but it just felt like that, those two different kind of styles in my mind, at least.
I've never heard it said, but I think you nailed it. The second you said it, I was like, yeah, I think that's exactly it. You feel like, oh yeah, I'm cool when the investor says it, and then when the customer says it, you're like, oh, we did it. That's amazing.
Yep.
And, I was telling one of my team members, I was like, my happiest moment of this fundraise and announcements was actually that I got an inbound email from all of our top 5 customers. Just congrats, this is incredible, good for you. Here's why we're so supportive and happy to be included in it as a logo, etc. Just randomly, all 5 of them sent me different emails over 3 days, just saying congrats, and I was like, that feels good, because if they were saying
We're
your
worried.
value prop or blank or so on, this is not what we're feeling, or we're not happy or whatever. It's just so different, and so that was a happy moment.
So we're coming up on time here, and I just before we finish, um, you're wise beyond your years. Clearly, you've built an incredible business to this point. You're still very young, and there are plenty of aspiring entrepreneurs like yourself. Hopefully, some of them will listen to this. And my question to you is, what advice can you give to the young aspiring entrepreneur that you can take from your experience, from your learnings?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I go back to that Founders Fund kind of memo and talk I had when they did RB, because part of it was not just, oh, I'm young, pace of learning, whatever. They actually put in their memo that we believe by the time Stored goes public, Sean will be roughly 30 years old, which will give him an incredible runway of another 20, 30 years as a public CEO. And I was like, wow, you're really signing me up for a very long tenure here in this note. But it seems like they, from a timeline perspective, they might not have been far off. But I was very privileged to do the commencement speech at Georgia Tech in 2022, which is actually part back to this conversation. It was hard for me to do because I was like, I don't feel good right now, but if the world thinks I look good and they want me to do this, okay. And my kind of theme or title was basically like, why not you? Because I don't particularly believe I have any sort of special skills or insights or brain or anything. I just try and fail a lot. And a few of the principles I tried to lay out in there of like what has helped me the most are things like don't be afraid to ask. From the earliest days, my parents were helping me write letters to business people that I wanted to learn from, to ask them if they would mentor me, to all sorts of things like that. Like just put yourself out there. The worst thing you can get is a no. Um, Another one was, there's a great kind of Steve Jobs quote that had always influenced me since I heard it when I was young, which was, uh, basically like when you're growing up, you're always told that the world around you is the way it is, and your job is to make a little money, save it, have a family, not bump into the walls too much. But the second you realize that everything around you that you call life was just made up by other people, and you can mold it and change it and influence and be part of it, your whole life changes. And honestly, like, I think my life changed when I heard that. And I was just like, wow, like, from literally the chair I'm sitting in to everything I see is just something someone out there made up and was passionate about. And there's no kind of like preordained answer. It's all just people trying. Why not try? And why not put yourself out there? Two, I think my final one would just be like, uh, just start and just try. I tried to make a joke like, I've always teased my team that I don't love Nike's just do it, in the sense of it's so hard to accomplish these things. But if it was just start it, I think very passionately about just get moving, go try, go start and make a tiny bit of progress every day. And then the very last one, and these tie all together, would be something about like, back to like, don't be afraid to ask, but use mentors. And I think that it's not the cheesy like, oh, go be part of every professional development group out there and go have a personal board of mentors and things like that. It's like, just try to find people that, on whatever vector of advice you need, are where you want to be with that advice. I'm very much the like, don't take the workout advice from the person that's not in the shape you want to be. Like, find whatever specific piece who is the best at that where you want to be, and go ask them. Try to find someone like one step ahead of you. Like, if you're trying to start working out, maybe you shouldn't go ask like a professional bodybuilder. Maybe you should ask like somebody who is 2 years into their journey and has made insane progress. Like, find that person. When I was a Georgia Tech founder, I was trying to find seed stage founders, Series A stage founders. I wasn't going to who's pre-IPO or a public CEO founder and can they give me all the advice, and ask a lot of questions, because I think, at least personally, I'm sure you feel the same, giving back those experiences is a source of good feeling. Like, you want to help enable that next generation of an entrepreneur and say, I didn't have anyone telling me these, or fortunately, I had some with some of those mentors. If I can just like, the hardest thing about being a young founder is the unknown unknowns. What don't I even know that I'm supposed to know? Um, sorry, if I need to know how to do something, but I don't even know that I need to know how to do something, how do I get through both of those rapidly? Uh,
Mhm.
and the more you can just shorten those cycles by leaning in with someone that one phase ahead of you, I've always found so much value. But sorry to go deep on a list. I just think that
No, it's great.
a lot of it is just putting yourself out there, trying, and being willing to not always look the brightest when you fail.
The second one was so true. Just the idea that everything was done by someone at some point who didn't know what they were doing, but they were willing to try. And when it's so disarming, because whether it's imposter syndrome or just the constant doubting of ourselves that we have, it's very grounding to hear and realize that everything was created by someone who didn't know what the heck they were doing at one point. So why not you? I really like that. So
Couldn't agree more. And I would only round it out with, I still tell people today, I probably don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying my best every single day. And I think when you're a founder, especially when you've had an incredible exit and success like you guys, everyone looks at you like, oh, you must have some answers that we don't know. And you're like, I don't know anything unique. I'm just trying.
you almost can develop more imposter syndrome after the success, because now it's expected that you have answers, and you're still the same kid who 10 years ago didn't have the answers and was maybe scared to admit that. So I think, being willing to just try, being unafraid of being the one who doesn't know the answer. I think those are great points. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today, telling me your story end to end and learning more about Stored. It's an incredible business you've built and continue to build. Um, so yeah.
Means a ton, Andrew. It's been a lot of fun to hang out with you. I feel like we've known each other from afar and bumped into each other a lot over the years, but it's really fun to go deep and share a little bit more about the story. And Really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, man. With everyone else, we'll see you next week.